Welcome into the WalterPicks Fantasy Football Show. I'm here with Seth. We are going deep into all of these starts and sits of Week 6, and we have some pretty deep, big names as far as the sits go, Seth. So we will be very interested in what's about to happen here. Starting with the start of the week here in a tight end in Mason Taylor. This guy has been climbing in the ranks, and very much so, because he is the second best option for this Jets team. I mean, outside of Garrett Wilson, who may or may not get clamped up this week against Pat Surtain, he is the best talent they have. Last week coming out with a career game. This rookie tight end, 12 targets. He had 67 yards, caught 9 of those targets. He had a good amount of fantasy points as well to go with it. Has not scored a touchdown yet. That could possibly change. But again, against this pretty good Denver defense, Seth, what is your opinion on Mason Taylor, this tight end that is probably the top added player off the waiver wire?
Yeah, I'm very excited to have Mason Taylor if you can get him for your team. I honestly have him as a trade for target as well if you couldn't get him off the waiver wire because of how good he's been so far. And exactly what you pointed out. Pat Surtain, he's going to be on Garrett Wilson this week. That makes him slightly scarier because obviously Pat Surtain is Pat Surtain. But look at the matchup tab. We've seen a couple tight ends so far do well. We had Tyler Warren. We had Gadsden. We had Dallas Goedert. We've had different tight ends show up and play well against this team. And Mason Taylor with 12 targets last week. Look at the target share as well. Absolutely incredible, 27%. He's a great start for week 6.
Yeah, and as we get deeper into this video, our sits will become more and more of a hot take. We're starting with Marvin Harrison Jr. in this one, guys. He has been up and down so far this year. Last week, he had 13.8 fantasy points in what was a beautifully positive matchup against the Tennessee Titans. It looked great. The week before that, he also put up 18 fantasy points on the Seahawks. Is he finding his stride? The question is, can he continue against the Indianapolis Colts, who may or may not have been super positive, 2 wide receiver ones? When you look at fantasy points allowed per game, the wide receivers are pretty much neutral. But when you look at the wide receiver one, it's a little bit more tough. Now he's coming into this matchup again against the Indianapolis Colts. Seth, what is your opinion on Marvin Harrison?
Yeah, I want to call this one out this week because he did have 2 decent weeks in a row. So let's not discount how he's been playing. And people that have him on their team are probably like, please stop telling me to sit this guy. He's finally put some good weeks. I'm done with that. But I do want to call out the Colts have one of the laws of fantasy football this year. Week 1, they held Tyreek Hill to under 10 points. Week 2, Courtland Sutton has almost 20 fantasy points every single week, except this week where he scored under 2 fantasy points. Week 3, Calvin Ridley. I mean, he's Calvin Ridley, but he scored under 4 fantasy points. Week 4, I mean, you can't really stop Puka Nacua. Let's just be honest about that. Puka Nacua did Puka Nacua things. But then week 5, Jacoby Myers under 10 fantasy points. You can see in most of these games, the wide receiver 2 actually scored more points. Trey Tucker, we see Alec Aminor, we see Troy Franklin, and we see Jalen Waddle. They scored about the same, I guess, in week 1. But they have taken away the number 1 wide receiver every single week again, except against the Rams. And this week, Marvin Harrison Jr. fits more into that Courtland Sutton style, the Calvin Ridley style. So I do want to temper expectations to say he's been good. The other thing I want to note out in his game log is that he did have almost all of his yards in the first drive of the game. He had about 47, I think. He did almost have a touchdown there. He went down at the 1. So that would have made it a huge week, no questions asked. But he did have almost all of his receptions in the first drive of the game, and after that he didn't really do too much. So they did have a big lead for most of the game, but I do want to temper expectation this week with Marvin Harrison Jr. against the Colts. Next week he plays Green Bay, then he finally gets some better matchups against Dallas. Seattle's been good. They'll get Devin Witherspoon back in the fantasy football playoffs. He does have a tough schedule. So again, for me, I'd be looking to sell high after some good weeks with this tough schedule, especially in the fantasy football playoffs and a couple more hard matchups throughout the season. But we'll have to see how he does this week. If he does well, maybe he can survive some of these tough matchups.
Yeah, and a guy that we're looking to possibly start over him this week is going to be Tet McMillan. And as we bring this up, guys, make sure to like this video if you have not already. We post videos like this and do live streams multiple times a week for you. It helps us as creators, and it can help you to start Tet McMillan. Now, I know to some he might be the definition of mid. He's averaging about 10 fantasy points per game. He has not broken out. I know you've probably heard all of your friends and other people in the fantasy football space say that Tet McMillan's breakout is coming. I fully believe this. He has been one of the most targeted wide receivers in the NFL, averaging just under 9 targets per game if you look at his logs here. He's playing all the snaps. He's running every single route on this offense. Jalen Coker could possibly come back from IR this week. That does not worry me at all you look at this matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. See what the Jets just did to like the Dallas Cowboys defense is one of the worst in allowing fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. We say you take advantage of these positive matchups. He hasn't necessarily been able to put together his breakout game yet. He's only had one game over 15 fantasy points. That was against the Arizona Cardinals in week 2. But this is a spot where McMillan on a roster and a team that is passing with the 10th highest pass volume in the league, it has to fall right for him eventually. And this Dallas Cowboys matchup is one where it's just impossible for him not to have a decent game. Seth, do you agree with how high I am on Tet this week?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. There's a couple things I look for fantasy football first start. The first is volume. He's got volume every single week. Second is matchup. He's got probably the best matchup available. When you have volume plus matchup, that's an amazing start for me.
And the next sit on this video is going to be Chase Brown. I know all of the Chase Brown owners that drafted this man, we are all crying because I was somebody that believed in him as well. And Jake Browning, this entire offense is just going down in flames right now. We look at last week, he played the lowest snap share of the entire season at 53%. Still finished as the RB24 despite only having 8 carries for a disgusting 27 yards. But all of that can come thanks to his receiving upside. He got so many targets. Can he be serviceable against a Green Bay Packers defense who is allowing the 4th least amount of fantasy points to running backs with a terrible offensive line? Again, everything, any bit of success he finds against this Packers defense is going to be in the receiving game. How much are we really going to expect? Seth, he has a very tough matchup here, and then another tough one following with the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 7. Are you trusting Chase Brown in your starting lineup?
Man, that's a tough question because the receptions make me optimistic. Anytime any player that's getting 7 receptions in a PPR league, it says, well, I probably should start that guy. But you look at the fantasy points, even with 7 receptions, only 12 fantasy points. And that's being a rounding up. That's being generous. I mean, he only generated 4.8 fantasy points with 7 receptions and some carries. Against Green Bay, it's unlikely he scores a touchdown, so he's going to need those 7 receptions again. Now, is that something that they're going to be able to produce? So far, the Green Bay's been great against running backs, but the receptions is the piece where he could shine. So for me, I think I'd lean towards sitting him on the bench. The upside's just not there because even if he does get 7 receptions again, he's probably going to end up with 12 fantasy points. So if that works for you, if you're like, hey, I'd take it, that kind of seems like his ceiling unless somehow he gets into the end zone. If not, he's probably going to let you down this week. So I'd bench him if you have any sort of other good option.
Yeah, guys. And as we get deeper into this sit list, the players are going to get higher and higher and higher in value. So it's going to be more of a tamper your expectations. If you're in a smaller league, you can definitely sit them. But just be aware that some of these guys might not have as good of a game as you expect. And we will go with Ja'Cory Bill Croskey-Merritt for our next start here, guys. Make sure to comment all of your start sit questions below. We will try to get to as many as we can. But this man here, I mean, as a Commanders fan, there's no bias here when it comes to fantasy football. It is only a matter of time until he gets more usage than a 40% snap share last week. I mean, it has to be above 50 at this point. Jeremy McNichols is not enough. Chris Rodriguez is not enough. He is showing legitimate breakout potential. 14 carries for 111 yards. That's over 7 yards per carry. He even got a few receptions. Now, I don't expect that to be his role. Like, he's not going to be a Chase Brown of a receiving back. But this is very, very good green flags that we're seeing here coming into a very positive matchup against the Chicago Bears this week. If he can continue this kind of role, and anybody that watched the Commanders game last week can see that he is clearly the best running back that brings juice to this offense, he should be able to build on this kind of performance and keep it going for the rest of the year. I would probably expect 50 to 60% of the snaps. Like, we're not going to come in and see a workhorse Bill yet. But I definitely think he is worth a flex start if you do have him. Again, because if you can put up 27 fantasy points against a pretty decent Chargers defense, what can we do against this Bears defense? Now, I know they have some history of this game being close, but this is a spot where I think JCM could find his way into your starting lineup. Seth, what do you think?
Not only do I want to start this guy, I need to trade for this guy for your team. So I'm not even going to talk about the start set. This guy is a lock. This guy's a lock for your lineups. I will just say the one thing, the most convincing thing for me, check out this snap percentage. This is your sign. I'm an opportunity kind of fantasy football manager. And when his snap percentage starts to jump up, he gets his starting quarterback back, goes almost to 50%, highest of the year. That is amazing. But look at this schedule. He places Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Seattle, Miami in the fantasy football playoff. He gets the Giants, the Eagles, and then Dallas. This is an incredible running back schedule for the entire season. He's got 2 tough matchups against Detroit, against Denver. Minnesota's about in the middle. But other than that, this has got to be one of the easiest running back schedules on this entire list. And with Jane Daniels at quarterback, this team will be scoring lots of points, just like they did against the Chargers. Now, the Chargers, they're missing a lot of offensive line. That hurt their offense. That allowed the Commanders to build a lead and kind of allowed them to run a little bit more. It was definitely a positive game for the Commanders. But look, this schedule is incredible. So not only am I starting Bill Croskey-Merritt this week, hopefully it continues, but I want to try to trade for him and see if I can get him for my team.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And one guy that we cannot be starting this week, McConkey, might be giving some fantasy managers a little bit of hope and false hope to that. Last week, he put up 14.9 points against my Commanders on the other side of this game. Looked pretty decent, but when you look a little bit deeper into the numbers here, it wasn't that much different than what we've been seeing in previous weeks. He had 5 receptions. That was tied for his second highest of the year, 30 some odd yards. Nothing crazy, but he got saved by a touchdown, which made him the wide receiver 20 on the week. He actually played 79% of the snaps, which isn't the highest. And when you have guys like Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen doing as much as they do, it looks like McConkey is going to continue to be a bit of a start-sit nightmare. I mean, you look at the previous weeks outside of this one, 2 points against the Giants defense. 2 fantasy points is not great. The week before that, 8 against the Denver Broncos, 9 against the Raiders. So it's not like it's matchup. It's a matchup situation. Like, he's still putting up bad games in very positive situations. Coming into this one against the Miami Dolphins, now they're kind of middle of the pack as far as fantasy points allowed to the wide receivers go. But if he can only get 5-6 targets a game, which he's about averaging, can we really trust him, especially with the low ADOT nature that the slot wide receivers are? And you have Quentin Johnson breaking out, who, with all of these offensive line injuries and Amarion Hampton injured, I do think it hurts Quentin Johnson more than the rest of these guys because he runs his route so deep and there's less time for those to develop downfield. So maybe they lean on McConkey a bit more, but we haven't seen anything to prove that that's actually going to happen. Seth, what is your opinion on McConkey this week?
Yeah, I just keep going back to the WalterPicks app, guys. If you don't have it, you can download it in the profile, get a free trial with code Avery, with code NOBS. Either one, guys, will get that for you. And you can see here that the snap percentage, we got to go by percentage because snaps will change game to game. But snap percentage went down quite a bit in this game. The route rate went down a lot in this game. Worst of the season in a game they were losing almost the entire time. This should have been a time where we saw a lot of McConkey because they're losing. They need to throw, and this was his least usage of the season. And the targets, the target rate actually slightly better. That's one thing I do like when he's out there. Of the total targets, he did slightly better, but it's still not great. A fifth of the targets is just not going to be enough when you're only getting 7 and you're not getting any yardage either, only 40 yards. This is a lot like Chase Brown. He had a decent amount of catches, 5 catches, but with 40 yards, that's not going to cut it for you each and every week. And we don't really see any growth in the yardage after week 1 where he scored 70, 74. He's actually gone down pretty much on a steady basis. The touchdown saved you last week. He's probably on your bench. I'm going to bench him again this week.
Yeah, and a guy that I honestly think we cannot bench and should be rostered in more leagues because just a week or two ago, he was on a lot of people's waivers, is Matthew Stafford. I mean, this guy has been torching. He's been cooking. The quarterback 8 last week against the San Francisco 49ers. The quarterback 2 the week before that against the Indianapolis Colts, putting up 25 and 27 fantasy points. Now coming in, oh, bro, this guy has one of the best stretches of matchups here, getting this week against the Baltimore Ravens. We saw what CJ Stroud and this entire Texans offense was just able to do. This team isn't bad. Their offensive line is bad. It's holding this entire team back. So when you can put up 40 points, I believe 44 to be exact, on this defense, imagine what Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, even Kyron Williams, all of these players, imagine what's going to happen against the Baltimore Ravens defense that's bad and injured, more importantly than anything else. I mean, over 40 passing attempts the last 2 weeks, over 350 yards the last 2 weeks. Like, this is the offense for the Rams that we expect when you have both these pass catchers and when you have the red zone target rate that Devontae Adams is getting. Like, they're throwing it up to him every time they're in the red zone, which is great for Matthew Stafford because he's getting more passing touchdowns. The volume is there. The matchup is there. This is one where I'm targeting and I'm putting him in all my starting lineups. If I'm in a 6-person league, an 8-person league, I don't care. the Baltimore matchup is one we want to be taking advantage of. Seth, are you as high on Matthew Stafford with the potential without Lamar Jackson? Maybe it's a blowout game.
Yeah, I don't think I'm quite as high. Now, I totally agree with everything you said. He's been absolutely elite. But the one thing I do want to point out is that week 1, week 2, and week 3, those were games where the Rams took an early lead. And they even against the Eagles had that really late game comeback. And then week 4 and week 5, the Rams got down by quite a bit and needed to pass the entire game. So when they've been ahead, he hasn't been as good for fantasy football with 2 kind of negative performances, 14 and 13. And I think against Baltimore, they're going to dominate this game. But I will say, like you said, they got 44 dropped on them this week. So when you're dropping that many points, I do think Matthew Stafford, he's got to go in lineups. I maybe not in the 6-person league. There may be some better options just because I'm worried Kyron Williams could take the touchdowns. But we could also see easily 3 touchdowns, another 300 yards, another easy 20-point performance. So the upside is really great here, and definitely someone that shouldn't be on waivers in any league. I definitely agree there.
Right. And Seth, speaking of upside, you know who doesn't have a lot right now?
Who doesn't have a lot of upside right now?
Alvin Kamara.
Oh, man.
Now this is unfortunate because I have a very close friend that drafted Alvin Kamara, and he asks me what to do with him every week. And it's tough, man, because he's been dropping in snap share every single week till last week against the New York Giants. By the way, a very positive matchup to running back points allowed. Only drops 9.5 fantasy points, but more importantly, 56% of the snaps, which leads to his lowest season total of rushing attempts at 8 for 27 yards. Now, it looks really bad. Is it going to be this low every week? You probably can't expect it. Like 8 rushing attempts is like absolutely atrocious. But you look at Kendre Miller on the other side, the second straight week he's had over 10 carries. It really does look like Alvin Kamara is losing this ground game work a little bit. Now, he's always going to have upside in the receiving game. It's always going to be there to be his saving grace. But again, if he is not getting all of the work on the ground, he is for right now keeping the goal line work. So that's going to be great for him if they do end up scoring. But every piece that gets taken away from Alvin Kamara is like a thorn in his side for Kendre Miller right now. So when you come into this matchup against the New England Patriots, who now have Christian Gonzalez back, who isn't necessarily going to affect the run game, but if you can stop the pass game for a Saints team that isn't necessarily that great, they can't stay on the field to have these rushing attempts. They can't necessarily get in the red zone to give him goal line opportunities. So Alvin Kamara is definitely like a red flag ringing in my head right now. Seth, what is your opinion on him coming into week 6?
Yeah, I think the one thing you have to watch out for is that lack of opportunity. I do like it, like you said, the goal line work is his. It makes a lot of sense too. You have a pass catching running back that can still run the ball. Kendre Miller's been more effective on the ground as well. Just want to point that out too. It's not like Kendre Miller, they're like, well, we want to save Alvin Kamara for the pass game. Kendre Miller's been better. So that's one thing to watch out for. But I'm going to bench him this week. But the one thing I want to call out, if you do have Alvin Kamara, if you're Avery's friend who always asks what to do with Alvin Kamara, make sure you're subscribed because we're probably going to talk about him next week as well because he plays the Bears. This is probably your opportunity to sell high on Alvin Kamara is when he plays the Bears next week, because that's where he should have a great matchup. Overall, the schedule isn't that great for the Saints here. So if I had Alvin Kamara, I'd be benching him this week, most likely. And next week, I'd probably start him against the Bears, and then I would try to sell if possible. Now, the other thing I want to know, Avery, and I want to get your opinion on this, is there's some trade rumors going around. There are some teams who definitely need a running back. Alvin Kamara honestly hasn't looked great on the ground, but I think you put him in a better team, a more explosive team. You could probably use his talents a little bit better. What do you think is there? Like, I'm saying maybe trade him away if he has a good week against the Bears. Maybe even he scores a touchdown this week against the Patriots. Do you think there's any merit to not doing that and hoping he gets traded to a different team?
Yeah, most of the time when somebody gets traded mid-season, it's not like their fantasy football points jump up a crazy amount, especially if you're a running back, because 90% of the time, a team you go to already has some kind of competition there to where you're not going to be like a number one workhorse getting 100% of the work. And he is an older running back. So regardless of what team he does end up going to, maybe he's not as utilized in the pass game. If he loses any of that role, it's going to definitely be a detriment to his fantasy points. So I don't think he's going to be used the same way. Like the role he has in the Saints is good. He's just not doing enough with it, and he's not being that efficient to get more touches. So I definitely do think selling Alvin Kamara is fine as far as his chances of going to a new team, I think it's about the same as Breece Hall because they are another team that is not winning games. And I mean, they could get him off the books because his contract year is coming up too. But speaking of the next start on this list, a guy that could possibly be put in your starting lineup if he starts and plays is Mac Jones. I never would have thought that I'm saying to start Mac Jones, but in his start so far this year, he has honestly been pretty decent. 22 points against the Rams last week, 14 against the Arizona Cardinals, but then 21 against the Saints the week before that. Now getting a matchup, one of the most positive against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their pass defense is not that good. They're a pass funnel of a defense. So if he ends up starting and Brock Purdy misses another game, if Brock Purdy's a starter, we'll start Brock Purdy in this matchup because, again, you want to take advantage of this. But again, the pass volume for Mac Jones has been great. 49 passing attempts last week, 41 the week before that, 39 the week before that. That is top 5 in the NFL. So if you're going to continue that level of efficiency and even the touchdowns that he's scoring as well, it's one that I do like and is also a reason why I think we can spot start Jake Tonges if you need him, because it looks like George Kittle is going to be out for another week here. If he is, and again, all of these wide receivers are dealing with injuries right now. Juwan Jennings, Pearsall out with injury as well. So Tonges, he looks like the number one option. Now, Kendrick Bourne, I'm not too hyped up about. I do think that his success, again, is coming from all these wide receivers being injured, and then also him spending 3 years with Mac Jones in New England. But as far as the quarterbacks go, I definitely like to start Mac Jones if you need it. Seth, are you taking the chance on what would be a more risky start?
Yeah, and I honestly I'm not too concerned. Like you said, he scored over 20 points in 2 of his starts. He didn't do great against Arizona, who's one of the top pass defenses in terms of not allowing fantasy points. And this week he's got a great matchup. Tampa Bay scores a lot of points. They are extremely difficult to stop. Baker Mayfield is baking. He's cooking. It doesn't matter if Bucky Irving is out. Baker Mayfield is, man, what an amazing game they played against Seattle. That was such a fun game. And this week against the 49ers, they're going to have to pass. And Mac 342 yards last week. 2 touchdowns. He's been electric. So I don't care who's in, who's out for the 49ers. They find a way. The offense is incredibly designed. They have Christian McCaffrey, who's somehow been the only healthy 49er. But that's really all you need. When you've got Christian McCaffrey, you have a wide receiver 1 in your backfield. And then everybody else just kind of works down the field away from him. And defenses have to try to stop him. If you don't stop Christian McCaffrey, that's number 1. So I still like Mac Jones as a great option. Again, and you get the red zone, you can pass your touchdown to Christian McCaffrey as well. Plus, he's had other people step up. So I'm going to start him this week. I think it's a great call off the waiver wire. He's going to be essentially free. So if you have the roster spot and you're like, well, Matt Stafford's not available. He's 94% available right now in leagues. I've got him as a waiver out of the week. The one thing I do want to call out is this schedule is brutal. This is probably the toughest schedule we've seen for the entire year. So not specifically for Mac Jones, but just a shout out for your 49ers players. I have a couple 49ers players in nearly all of my leagues, and I may look at some trades after today, just like always be reviewing the schedule. I want to win my league, and when I see Tennessee and the Colts in week 15 and 16, Cleveland, week 13, the bye week, week 14, this is a pretty rough schedule, but I am confident to start in week 6.
Yeah, and speaking of confident starts, one that we should probably pump the brakes on a little bit more right now is Derrick Henry. Now, all things considered, he did have, I guess, what you would call a bounce back game for Derrick Henry. I mean, last week against the
under
Houston
10
Texans,
fantasy points still, though.
They got boat raced. The reason I say this is because he had an increase in snaps, 65% of the snaps last week. Keep in mind, that was with Keaton Mitchell's first game back, so him and Justice Hill. And he gets an increase in snaps. He's 15 total attempts, his second highest rushing attempt total since week 1, where he put up 29 fantasy points. But only 33 yards. That's under 3 yards per carry. He got saved by a touchdown. He was still the RB29 despite that. And what exactly can we see improve this week? Again, another week with Keaton Mitchell healthy, now coming into one of the toughest matchups against the Rams defense, not allowing a lot of fantasy points or yards per carry on average to running backs. What kind of snap share can we expect for Derrick Henry? Is Lamar Jackson coming back? Can this offense score points? Is he going to get in the red zone? Seth, I know you were a Derrick Henry enthusiast for as his fantasy value of not being in on him. What do you think is his expectations?
I think he's cooked. Like, he's cooked, especially if Lamar Jackson doesn't play. Because we look at 33 yards and a touchdown. Like you said, RB29. If you score a touchdown and have 15 carries, you should not be RB29. He scored under 10 fantasy points. It's just ridiculous. 33 rush yards on 15 attempts is terrible. And they're going to lose bad as well. We already talked about Matt Stafford. My worry for Matt Stafford that I called out, Avery, was they're going to win by way too much. They're just going to destroy the Ravens team, and they're going to have this huge lead, and they're just going to run the whole game. Derrick Henry is just not a factor at that point. But Cooper Rush, he's got one of the lowest depth of target in the entire league. We talked about that last week. That's why you guys should be subscribed. You would have heard that as we talked about it. And one of the things that led to was you can stack the box. So it's literally the worst quarterback to have for Derrick Henry, because if your quarterback's not throwing deep and you have Derrick Henry, well, then we just bring everybody to the line. It's an awful combination. And the Rams defense has been really great against the running back. They're number 3 in the entire league. Against Cleveland, the number 2 team, Derrick Henry had 2.3 fantasy points, and that was when Lamar Jackson was in the game. The one kind of thing we have to talk about, though, is the schedule as well. Guys, schedule is huge. Do not forget about it. And that's why you do want to have the WalterPicks app, because the matchup tab can also help you do your research here. But week 8, after the bye week, they have a chance to get things right and say, guys, what are we going to do? We got to figure this out. They should have Lamar Jackson back. He plays Chicago. He plays Miami. And then we look further into the schedule. He plays the Bengals twice as well. Do you trade him away? That's the real question, is do we trade him away? Because right now, people will trade for him. It's Derrick Henry. They see the schedule. They will trade for him. I think I probably would. So far, the performance has been terrible. And I know it's Derrick Henry. I know the matchups have been a little bit rough, but the performances have been terrible. So if we look through the teams, I know the games get easier, but I think I would look to trade him away, especially if somehow you have a good record. But if you're 0-5, I think take a risk. Try to get him for your team, buy him low, and hope he bounces back here. What do you think? What do you think, Avery? Would you agree with my strategy? If you're 5-0, trade him away. If you're 0-5, try to trade for him, or what do you think for the rest of the season here?
Yeah, I think both are completely valid. I find it hard to believe that Derrick Henry is just completely cooked beyond all belief and can't average over 10 fantasy points anymore. But on the other side of that, like, he is getting older. Maybe they start using some of these other running backs a bit more. I mean, we saw that a little bit last year, not to this extent. So I think I'm okay with trading away and trading forward depending on what your team needs, which is, again, why you need to use the WalterPicks app, because it can sync to your league, knows exactly who's on your roster, what settings you have, and it can help you make those trades and finesse all of your league mates, honestly, which is what I use a trade analyzer for. But Seth, if you go to the start sit tool here, we can also look at the defenses. If you look at WalterPicks' top defenses for week 6, a few there is on the waiver wire that are in the top. Our number 1 defense this week is going to be the Green Bay Packers, and they get a beautiful matchup. So I 100% understand that against the Cincinnati Bengals. I believe in 4 started games, Jake Browning has 8 interceptions. Their offensive line is terrible. I could see it. Like, there's really nothing going right as far as that goes for the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Packers defense is going to eat. Also, our number 2 defense, the Steelers, both of these are still available in over 30 or 40% of leagues. So they're a little bit higher rostered. But again, Steelers versus the Cleveland Browns. I know Dylan Gabriel looked decent last week, but again, it's still not a top offense. And our top waiver wire ad defense is going to be the Raiders versus the Tennessee Titans. The Raiders defense is pretty decent. You can see how high they are in these rankings. But the Tennessee Titans offense is just that much worse. I mean, they got their win last week. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was an ugly game, but it was there. It was a win. But still, they're averaging less than 160 passing yards per game. The offense is not great. The offensive line has some holes in it. It's just a great spot for the Raiders defense to start. And with that, let us know what start sit questions you guys have in the comments. We will see you in the next live streams and videos coming very soon. That's going to kick it off and end this video for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.